the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, are two of the most famous religious leaders of the last half of the 20th century. They both share the honor of having been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and they both have distinguished and well-reserved reputations that go far beyond their status as religious leaders. Martin Luther King Jr. was, and the Dalai Lama still is, a formidable player on the world's political stage. While they have dramatically different speaking styles, they both have been proven adept at persuading their listeners to change their beliefs and in inspiring them to actions that they would not have previously pursued. I believe their speaking styles are in large part molded by their philosophical and faith beliefs, and less by their subject matter or the type of audience they are addressing. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. comes from a particularly demonstrative aspect of the Western Abrahamic traditions, Christianity, while His Holiness the Dalai Lama comes from the more cerebral and meditative aspect of the Eastern Buddhist traditions of Tibet. Their speaking styles may also have been influenced by how they were raised. Dr. King was raised in a moderate-income family, the son and grandson of literate and eloquent preacher men. As such, while he was never wanting for the basics, he was also not from wealth, nor did he acquire great wealth during his lifetime. Even his Nobel Prize winnings went back into the civil rights movement. The Dalai Lama was born into great poverty, but upon his recognition as the reincarnation of the 13th Dalai Lama, he was elevated into a world of wealth and great responsibility, initially as a religious leader and eventually as a political leader of the nation in exile. These differences in upbringing have also contributed to their rhetorical styles as well as their divergent ways of approaching a problem. Any competent public speaker will meet their audience at the audience's needs and level of comprehension. However, exceptional public speakers will bring the audience to a higher place, a level of compassion and understanding for the speaker's message that moves the audience to action, galvanized as if they were of one consciousness. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Dalai Lama seem to share that gift for conversion of their audiences. They shared not only a religious ethos and commitment to justice, but also a role model. Both have described the strong influence exerted upon them by the teachings of the famed Indian leader Mahatma Gandhi, whose belief in nonviolence completely permeated the philosophy of both of these great men. Lamo Dandub, the man who eventually became His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, was born on July 6, 1935 in the northeastern Tibetan village of Taksar. Born to a peasant family, His Holiness was recognized at the age of 2 in accordance with Tibetan tradition as the reincarnation of his predecessor, the 13th Dalai Lama, and thus an incarnation of Avalokitesvara, the Buddha of compassion. The enthronement ceremony took place on February 22, 1940, in Lhasa, the capital of Tibet. At the age of 15, after the Chinese government sent in their army to invade Tibet, the Dalai Lama assumed full political power as the Tibetan head of state, as well as the spiritual leader of the Tibetan people. His Holiness tried for years to negotiate a peaceful resolution to the Chinese repression. However, on March 10, 1959, the matter came to a boiling point during the largest demonstration in Tibetan history, calling for the Chinese to leave Tibet. The Tibetan national uprising was soon crushed by the Chinese army, and the Dalai Lama was forced to escape to India, where he was given political asylum. He has presided over the Tibetan government in exile there ever since. The Dalai Lama still pursues negotiation with the Chinese government to this day. However, he does not seek Tibetan independence from China. Instead, he wants a sort of cultural autonomy for Tibet within China, over matters of spirituality and culture and the environment of Tibet. In the months running up to China's World Coming Out Party, the hosting of the 2008 Summer Olympics, the Chinese government has again chosen to repress the Tibetans. These actions have generated worldwide condemnation of the Chinese government at a time when they are trying desperately to shine on the world stage. and because the Dalai Lama is so committed to a peaceful resolution to Tibetan autonomy within the Chinese state. He is also taking criticism for not going far enough in protesting the treatment of the Tibetans by the Chinese. His Holiness's Buddhist education began at age 6, and by 1959, at the age of 25, he had completed the Geshe Larampa degree, Doctorate of Buddhist Philosophy. Since then, the Dalai Lama has traveled the world over, speaking about Tibetan autonomy within China, as well as teaching about Buddhism. He has received dozens of honorary degrees and awards, including a Doctor of Laws degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in May of 1998. In 1959, with the newly constituted Tibetan government in exile, His Holiness saw that his immediate and urgent task was to save both the Tibetan exiles and their culture alike. Economic development was promoted, and the creation of a Tibetan educational system was established to raise refugee children with the full knowledge of their language, history, religion, and culture. Over 200 monasteries have been re-established to preserve the vast corpus of Tibetan Buddhist teachings, the essence of the Tibetan way of life. Michael Luther King was born on January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. His name was later changed to Martin Jr. Martin graduated from the segregated public schools of Atlanta at the ripe old age of 15, then attended Morehouse College, where he received a Bachelor of Arts degree 4 years later. From there, Martin went to Crozier Theological Seminary and received his Bachelor of Divinity by age 22, and then on to pursue his doctorate at Boston University. While at Crozier, he was elected class president of the predominantly white senior class. It was in Boston that Martin met and married Coretta Scott. They eventually had 2 sons and 2 daughters together. In 1954, Martin Luther King Jr. became the pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. He also, like his grandfather and father before him, pastored at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta as co-pastor with his father from 1960 until his death in 1968. Dr. King was named to the Executive Committee of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or NAACP. In 1957, he was elected president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization formed to provide new leadership for the now burgeoning civil rights movement. The ideals of this organization he took from Christianity, its operational techniques from Gandhi. In the 11-year period between 1957 and 1968, King traveled over 6 million miles and spoke over 2,500 times, appearing wherever there was injustice, protest, or action. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life was all about social justice, especially for Negroes in the United States. He demonstrated his commitment to that end by organizing bus boycotts in Montgomery, Alabama to desegregate the buses, by organizing the successful Voting Rights March from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, which brought much-needed national attention to the civil rights movement, and by delivering to more than 250,000 marchers in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., one of the greatest pieces of oratory in the 20th century, his I Have a Dream speech. However, Dr. King was not just an advocate for the rights of blacks in this country. He was an opponent of the Vietnam War and spoke out loudly and often about poverty in America, regardless of the race of the poor. He was a powerful force at the podium. But his words, as well as his deeds, were sown with respect for others and for nonviolent protest towards those ends. His ability to persuade followers to act in a resolute defiance without resorting to violence, especially when violence was being heaped upon them, was nothing short of amazing. I believe that his followers were willing to act this way because Dr. King was willing to show them how. He was arrested more than 20 times. His home was